Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this platform wherein we're going to talk over the next 60 minutes on the topic online retail in India. Wave. Formalize this WebEx platform from years and on a weekly basis. Our first attempt on this initiative, and we're happy to have around 143 participants join us. We've scheduled an hour for this, and we're eager to cover a comprehensive range of topics, so we might be a little brisk on a few issues and themes. However, on the Q&A, we just wanted to let you know that we have a formalized approach wherein you can all write in your Q&A, ping us your questions. We'll collate it and come back to you in a day or two with it in an FAQ format. So a quick introduction to RedSeer. We are a young 9-year-old organization with more than 150 team members. And the unique value proposition that RedSeer brings to the table is that we work with new age themes and topics. And that's why our core proposition is on-ground data for a bottom-up comprehensive approach to a theme and a topic. Majority of our work is in the sphere of e-commerce, and we are in fact the largest advisory firm in this space. We have advised more than 23 billion of investments in this space in the recent past. We worked with 90% of the GMV that operates in this on the e-commerce space in India. And we work across 20 sectors, including e-tailing, cabs, online food delivery, education technology, and fintech. Introducing you to the speakers, Mrigank is a engagement manager with RedSeer. He brings 5 years of experience of consulting experience, working with funds and corporates in the internet ecosystem. He has worked on various diligence mandates for funds investing across e-tailing, logistics, online food delivery. And he has worked closely with corporates across geographies globally as well as in India on growth strategies. Another key member who will be talking to you today is Ujjwal Chaudhary. He too is an engagement manager. Ujjwal brings 7 years of consulting experience working with funds and corporates in internet as well as the healthcare ecosystem. He has worked on various due diligence mandates, again across online food retail, food delivery, online fashion, fintech, as well as education technology. And he has also worked with corporates in developing their growth plan across the India geography. So over to Mrigank and Ujjwal to talk to us for the next 60 minutes on this topic.
Thanks a lot, Paki, for the intro, and thanks a lot, everyone, for joining in. And happy to have you all here for this viewpoint that we want to present. So let's get started with the presentation. I hope you all can see the screens. I'll just move on to the things that we would like to talk about today. So today, essentially, there are 5 themes that we would like to speak about. We would start off with talking about how the demand side landscape is changing in the for Indian e-commerce, and then how are the positioning of the different e-commerce players changing in this new wave of demand. What opportunities exist to leverage the offline partners in this new journey of e-commerce? Of course, Walmart's entry is a big story of the last few months, so how that is going to impact the space. And finally, we'll conclude with some of the other mega trends which are shaping which are likely to shape the e-commerce journey going forward. So having said that, without further ado, I'll just move on to the first story itself, the evolution of the demand side landscape. So this is how we look at the structure of the demand side for the Indian e-commerce. So we know that India is a large internet population base of almost 500 million users. But once you sort of account for the evolution of users across the stages, we only end up getting 20% of the total internet using population, less than 20% in fact, which actually shops or transacts online on some e-commerce platform. So by any standard, this number is extremely low. And the comparable number for China and US markets, they are like more than double this percentage of 20%. So this is how the situation looks like in the calendar year 2017. And last 1 year is that there has been a there has been a couple of disrupting factors which have changed the game in terms of the user penetration. So we have the impact of Reliance Jio and other cheap data services sort of completely disrupting the game in terms of how per MB of per GB of data is priced at. So as we can see on the right side of this slide, this has led to an exponential growth in the total data being consumed by Indians, and of course supported by the availability of cheap smartphones from Xiaomi and all the others. So with such a disruption happening on the data and the smartphone side, what we see is that the total journey that a user makes in the e-commerce, in the online world, that has sort of been compressed in a very big way. So we start off the journey from the bottom left of the slide. So a user, say a user, he gains awareness about how about e-commerce. Perhaps he reads a newspaper, perhaps he talks to his friends. He understands that smartphones get sold cheap on online platforms. So he goes online. He just gets hold of a smartphone from Xiaomi or some other platforms, and then he starts exploring the smartphone, exploring buying tickets and other services. After a very long period of usage, after a long period of getting comfortable, finally the user says that, okay, now I'm comfortable to buy fashion or other home category or FMCG category online. So this whole process from converting from a user getting a smartphone to finally going online to buy e-commerce regularly, it's a very long process. And this is where, when the users have access to cheap data and a cheap smartphone, when they spend a lot of time, that is what is sort of compressing this whole maturity curve together. And what we end up seeing is visible in the next slide. This, we spoke about 90 million annual online shoppers. Now we expect that with this kind of compression happening on the user maturity, the total online shoppers in India will become 185 million by 2020. So it's more than 2x growth expected at the bottom of the funnel, as this particular slide shows. So that's about a 27% year-on-year growth in the total internet using population, primarily brought about these data and handset disruptions. So moving on, so we spoke about the fact that over the next 3 years, the online shoppers will be growing at about 27% growth rate. Now, with this kind of growth rate, we do expect that categories like fashion, FMCG, to some extent other high frequency categories, they will become more and more prominent as part of the overall purchasing process. So with that happening, and with the total users increasing, we expect the industry GMV to be growing at 40% annually over the next 3 years. So I'll show this next slide to you where we see the historical evolution of the industry GMV. So this slide very clearly gives how the industry has evolved in a very different way year on year over the last 6 years. So actually, the big boom for online retailing started in 2014, when there was almost a tripling of the industry right from in a very, very short time. So e-tailing became $13 billion from just $4.5 billion. This was supported by the huge funding from Tiger Global, and then of course the other investors coming into the picture. That was a very big year for retailing in 2014-15. Then of course we faced some speed breakers in 2015-16 because of government regulations on discounting, on not having own sellers. 2016-17 again kind of like a bounce back year. So we had SoftBank, Tencent, all the other companies again backing the whole landscape of internet regulatory constraints. The companies found ways to work around those constraints. And with the geo disruption, with the growth in the total internet users, again there was a fresh momentum coming to the industry. And now, as we said, over the next few years, primarily driven by the new users, which will double from 90 to 180 million, we expect that the overall e-commerce GMV will go to $50 billion by 2020 from about $18.6 billion right now. So I think we are very bullish about how the industry is going to evolve over the next a few years because of the increase in the total base. So just for reference, right now at a monthly level, there are about 25, 27 million Indians who shop online on a monthly active basis. So this number we expect to dramatically increase over the next 3 years, and that's what is going to drive the big jump for the industry going forward. So now, I think I will draw your attention to this next slide that I'm going to talk about. I think more than just the GMV of the industry increasing, I think what is interesting is how the composition of the customers is going to shift. So if you look at the 2017 numbers, We have about 90 million annual online shoppers, out of which it's mostly metro driven. It's almost 40% people who are sitting out of metros. And of course, there is a chunk of people from non-metros as well. But as you see this chart evolving, you can see very well that in the people from tier 2 cities, they are going to compose 60% of the market by 2020. So if you look at the CAGR, you can see that it's a very large chunk of the growth. In fact, I would say metro consumers will be primarily stagnant, just 10% annual CAGR, but the tier 2 consumers will be growing at 42% over the next few years to take the industry from 90 million to 185 million users in a big way. So that's a complete changing of the game, right, in terms of the demand base. So from a demand base primarily focused on the metro shopper, perhaps a higher income group shopper, we are going to be, the industry needs to now serve a shopper which is completely different in their geography, in their behavior, and in their particular needs. So keeping this dramatic shift of industry in mind, in the next slide, we talk about how do we sort of look at the industry from a demand side again. So right now, if you break down the structure of the industry, the majority of the sales are coming from what we call as the 3M customer segment. So essentially, this is a male customer, most of them who are sitting out of metros, and they are fairly moneyed. I mean, largely on the higher income group. So some statistics for them, you can see that metro shoppers are more than 40%. Most of them are males, and most of them are from the higher income groups. Now, to take the industry to the next level, where the tier 2 customers, perhaps the lower income groups, are going to dominate, it's a complete sea change in how the demand side would look like. And this is really important because right now, the type B customer, what we call the non-privileged, or the non 3M customer, that is perhaps not such a big part of the total online market. But as the market becomes $50 billion as projected by us by 2020, we see that the non 3M market, the type B customer market, will account for a fairly significant share of the pie. So till now, till now you can say that maybe retailers were getting away by ignoring that one part of the market. Maybe it was enough to just cater to the type A, because I mean, as you can see on the online platforms, right, everyone was giving the English user interface. People were happy to sell the smartphones and some niche categories. But point being that over the next few years, the decision to do the type B shoppers, that will no longer be a sort of just a choice, right? And you have to actively pursue that category. So you cannot really you cannot really not focus on that category. It's going to be such a big pie going forward. So that's how we look at how the demand structure is, the customer side is evolving, and it's really a very fundamental shift happening. I think once this shift happens in the structure, what will also change is the needs that customers, that these two segments have. So in this particular slide, we have tried to break down the sort of across the customer buying journey. What does a type A shopper need versus a type B shopper need? And the bigger point that we are trying to make here is that if you look at the needs, they are worlds apart, right? It's almost like it's two very, very different markets with two almost contrasting or conflicting needs. So I'll just take one example. So for example, if you look at the browsing experience requirement, right? So for a typical type A shopper, and this is reflected in the online platforms, all the marketing communication, all the offers, the user interface itself, all of that is typically in English, right? Because this is a class of people who are quite comfortable using English for the day-to-day needs. However, when you start going to the tier 2 cities, perhaps the lower income groups and the other demographics, we see that regional languages are the main medium of comfort. And the fact is that today, none of the big horizontals, or to some extent even the big verticals, none of them have a multilingual interface. So this just shows how much this type B customer has not been sort of given a lot of priority in the strategy of these big retailers. So that's what will need to change, and that's what will be a big reinvention that retailers will need to do in order to cater to that particular group. Which one? Any other points on the?
And we have seen this replicate across other industries as well. So if you look at content, for example, what we are seeing is that players who are providing vernacular language experience, they are seeing a very large percentage of customers coming from tier 2 towns. In Hindi, for Kannada, for Telugu, all of the regional languages. So the customer, the readers who are the consumers who are consuming the content are doing that in multiple languages, and that is leading to an increase in their customer base from year to plus now. So I think we are seeing that replicate across industries.
I think content companies in this aspect, they have been much more ahead of the curve when compared to the retailers, and definitely we believe that a similar move is going to happen on the e-tailing front as well. This demographic cannot be ignored for any longer. So in the next few slides, what I'm going to do is to talk about how some of the specific levers that e-tailers will need to pull in order to better cater to this demographic, and we'll talk about some of the category mix that is going to evolve and the delivery experience part of it. So right, yeah. So in this particular slide, we just showing the evolution of the e-commerce GMV by category. So the most interesting thing that stands out from this chart is that mobiles as a category is going to continue hovering about 50% of the mark for the total category going forward. I mean, the total mobile penetration in India still remains fairly low compared to other economies, and we are still far away from the China kind of situation where the smartphone sales are stagnating. So we do believe that mobile smartphones will continue to dominate the overall category basket, along with the other electronics and fashion. Having said that, there is definitely categories like FMCG and home, very small categories, as you can see, barely in single digits. These are some categories which are going to see offshoots of growth in the next few years. And the reason they are really important is that these are, in a very proper sense, you can call them mass reach out categories. FMCG grocery itself is about $400-500 billion pie in the total retail, right? And right now that is barely touched at all in the online domain. So as we expand the pie of the addressable market, the customer base, even in terms of the category mix, we need to look at FMCG as one of the big success levers. And of course, we see this in the minds of retailers as well. So in this particular slide, we have shown how the online FMCG category it has evolved over the last few years. Just to sort of summarize what we see in this slide, I think the online FMCG industry was pretty much in an experimentation phase, 2014, 2015, right? So we had players like Pepper Tap, we had the likes of Grofers, all of them trying out different models, the local, hyper-local delivery, one-day delivery, expanding to tier 2 cities and whatnot. So that was a phase of experimentation. A lot of ideas were experimented with, a lot of attempts made. However, of course, we all know the end story, right? In 2016, some of these companies shut down, companies scaled back their operation. And now, post 2017, we are seeing somewhat of a stable business model and 3-4 big emerging companies. We have the likes of Amazon, Big Basket, and Roofers actively playing their roles in this category. And interestingly enough, there's a lot of offline players also now looking to take a part of this pie, because I mean, they realize that FMCG as a category, like the tier 2 shoppers, they cannot be ignored. So that's the big pie people are actively exploring. I think a couple of offline examples which come to mind, I think it's D-Mart with its ready offering. I think that's one of the offline players that's looking at this space. So having talked about how important FMCG as a category is in the minds of online players now, and of course, increasingly in the minds of offline players, I think we'll just spend a couple of minutes talking about what is the differentiators that online players are using in the grocery category. So I think having learned from their past experiences in which the delivery of grocery was pretty much broken, right? I think some of us must have experienced ordering from Grofers and maybe not getting the right items, maybe getting multiple packages. The whole delivery thing was pretty much broken. So after all of this experimentation, failures, and the bad experiences, now the big lever which retailers are using in grocery category is of end-to-end control of the supply chain in a very tight way, which is what something we called having the right product at the right time to the customer. How this is playing out is that for Big Basket and Grofers and Amazon now, all of them have a very almost 100% share of their captive delivery. So, for example, Grofers has 95% from its own arm. Amazon, of course, heavily leveraging ATS, Amazon Transportation Services, as their main logistics arm. So, with this tight kind of delivery control, they are able to offer a bit premium, superior experience to the customer. And as these 3 players keep on investing in this category, delivery will become a big, more and more important lever. However, along with delivery, it's not just important to deliver it on time. Of course, we also need to have the inventory at the right location. So in this slide, we talk about how the warehousing looks like. So the big trend happening for all these players is that they are expanding into more and more mini warehouses or dark stores across the cities. So the goal is that you have the a select set of assortment which the customer really wants. You have it as close to the customer as possible. And then once you have this assortment, you deliver it with your own captive logistics arm. So essentially, by doing this kind of warehousing and supply chain, the broken supply chain experience that was a feature of online FMCG in the last few years, that is being solved to a great extent. And I think these companies are setting up a very strong sort of base of customers who will get comfortable with buying FMCG. And now when new players enter, I think they won't have to invest a lot on this experimentation because people are now comfortable with the idea of buying FMCG kind of category online. So that's one big, I would say, maturation that has happened in terms of supply of this category. Uh, Categories like FMCG and to a very great extent like fashion and also home. These are the plays that are going to drive the retailing industry going forward because they cater to a much more wider sort of base of customers rather than only catering to a narrow pie. So when the volumes of such categories grow, what we are going to see is a steep jump in the total number of shipments that the e-commerce industry delivers on a daily basis. So in this particular slide, we try to show that number, how it has evolved over the last few years. So as of 2017, the industry retailing players were doing about 1.5 million daily shipments. And with the growth in the categories, with the growth in the FMCG fashion and other categories, this is going to almost triple over the next 3 years. So with this kind of 3x growth in scale expected, definitely there's a role to play for all the logistics players which we have mentioned on the slide. So just to point out one fact is that even with the steep growth and scale, retailers are really focusing on serving these delivery needs via their own captive logistics. So for example, Flipkart has the e-cart. It accounts for almost I think 85% of the total volumes. Amazon's ATS is always accounted for about 75-80%. And even as retailers are expanding to tier 2 cities, we see this percentage of captive shipments still continuing to hold true, which means that they are really intent on ensuring that same smooth experience across the city tier. So, in their mind, they have identified tier 2 as a segment where the same experience is deserved. However, in spite of this thing, of course, there will be a small chunk of the pie, maybe in rural areas or in a bit difficult to reach areas like Northeast or some other places where there is a play available for the third-party logistics as well. We have e-commerce, Com Express. I think they're very strong in the eastern part of the country, and Blue Dart, of course, with their own network of flights. I think they have a small role to play. And some of these companies like Gati are pretty specialized in the large goods delivery. So point being that while captive logistics will remain a big part of the way because consumer experience needs to be controlled, there is definitely a small chunk of pie which is going to be held by these 3PLs, so perhaps in certain geographies or in certain categories. Now, if you look at the chart at the top right, I think this is an interesting chart because it's pretty beneficial for the overall ecosystem. As the scale increases to 3x and as players increase their captive share of the orders, we see the cost per shipment coming down by almost 20% over the next few years. This will have wider implications for the industry because this means that retailers can serve their customers at a much more cost efficient price point, just overall bringing down the cost of serving the customer. So I think that's a win-win for the retailers as well as for the customers themselves. In slide 18, so we spoke about how the volumes are going to grow, and this slide just speaks about the fact that at the back end, the industry has invested in fairly robust infrastructure to cater to this steep growth. So on the left side, we have the total number of fulfillment centers and delivery centers that retailers have in India today. So back in 2015, there were barely 200 delivery centers and 60 FCs warehouses pan India. Now the same number has expanded multifold, 200 plus FCs and for 1,200 delivery centers. So that's a steep expansion in the backend infrastructure to support the growth, right? And many of them, of course, are not operating at full capacity. But the point being that retailers are fairly well equipped to cater to the growing demand that is going to come. And we haven't pointed it out here, but if you look at the spread of these FCs and delivery centers, you would see that many of them are now opening up closer to the tier 2 sort of locations. So the intent is to get closer and closer to the tier 2, tier 3 kind of customers to again get the right product at the right time. And in parallel with this trend on the right side, you can see that the share of fulfilled shipments. So the shipments which come from the warehouses rather than from the sellers, that has also experienced a steady increase with more warehouses opening up. And that again is a very important lever to ensure customer satisfaction, so that there is availability of the product and customers don't end up with getting bricks instead of iPhones. So that kind of initiative is helping to build the trust and in the customer. So the last mile jump from, so customers have this fear of not actually buying products, right, because of perhaps bad experiences or bad perception. This kind of reliable experience in warehousing and delivery, this is what is breaking down the fear sort of the customer, and this becomes extremely important for a tier 2 customer who could probably have a lot of inherent biases before transacting for a product online. So that's on the infrastructure side, how industry is getting ready to meet the demand. And in slide number 19, this is the O2D time of the industry, how that is moving. So from about 6 days of, or perhaps 5.5 days of average delivery time to ship an order across India in 2015, this has come down by about 10-12%, and with the more and more warehouses opening up and delivery centers opening up. So on the face of it, of course, this chart looks like a big positive, big win for the industry because the delivery speeds have come down. But two major observations here. I think one point is that in our research with the thousands of customers that we do across India, more than the delivery speed, a lot of what many of the customers need is express delivery, right? So for them, if an item comes after the 3-day or 3.5-day time span, I think the satisfaction becomes kind of flat. It doesn't really impact the satisfaction. However, we see that when the number of the orders are coming on a same day or the next day basis, that is where the NPS is is very, very high for the customer base. So while at an aggregate level, the overall O2D time has come down a bit, I think what the industry needs to work more on is the increasing the share of same day, next day shipments, which currently stands at about 20-25% of the pie, and of course coming down for a bit. So that's one observation. More than this overall speed, I think the next wave of investment will be going to improve the express delivery share. Secondly, what we see in our customer research is that the tier 2 consumer is not necessarily concerned with the delivery speeds per se. For such a consumer, what is more important is to have a delivery solution rather than just a packet being delivered. So when I say delivery solution, essentially I'm saying that, for example, if you order a large appliance online, what you need from the company is not just the person keeps the item in the house. There's also a need to have the demo of the item being done, the installation of the good being carried out. Only when you have the comfort that an item will be completely installed by the e-commerce company, only then will you sort of take the pain to buy it online, because otherwise you have a lot of options offline, right? So I mean, the offline mode is very competitive. So two big takeaways from this slide. One is that express deliveries are going to be the next big mode of investment for retailers, continue to be invested in for higher NPS. Secondly, for tier 2 customers, I think delivery solutions is what retailers are going to focus on to convert them to buying some of the more challenging categories from an online platform. This slide 20 where I am on, I think this is again an NPS study which we do from RedSeer, is a retailing leadership index, where we speak to more than 10,000 customers on a quarterly basis. So what this analysis tells us is that as of now, as of 2017, the major customer segments are pretty happy with the purchasing experience aspects. So you have parameters like product variety, the app experience, the pricing, and product quality. A large chunk of customers are very, very satisfied with this aspect. However, as we said earlier, today's e-commerce customer is largely a 3M kind of customer, right? So metro, mail, and a bit of money. So okay, for them maybe this kind of satisfaction is fine. But what we believe is that this kind of satisfaction won't be applicable as the industry expands to the type B or the tier 2 kind of customer. We speak of four additional aspects that retailers would need to focus on. One is that the TG relevant assortment is something that's going to play a big role. Right now, of course, for a type A customer, the assortment is fairly relevant. As we move on to more and more type 2 customers, the need for having a private label, more and more of a value offering, that is what is going to increasingly become the differentiator, and that's where the investments would need to go in. Second is a challenge of assortment and remote pin codes. So often, if you try to order some useful item in a remote pin code, often there is no availability or the delivery time is extremely long. So that is not going to work out when 60% of the consumers will be sitting in a tier 2 location. That is what is going to fundamentally need to change. And a couple of other aspects on the user interface. we would need a lighter user interface to solve the discoverability challenge, and of course, a multilingual interface as well. So while the current experience is satisfactory from a type A customer perspective, the experience will need to change dramatically to cater to a broader segment, is what we're seeing on the left side of this analysis. On the right side, of course, the big message is that on the post-delivery experience, the customer support and returns, even the current customer segments are not at all satisfied. There's a lot of dissatisfaction coming from the return rates and the fact that many categories are not allowed for return since the last couple of years. Again, there we believe that a simplified returns procedure along with a multilingual customer support rolled out on a large scale, that's going to be one of the big differentiators. And the other interesting piece here is that a lot of the current customer segments, they are fine to sort of not do a lot of calls to retailers to solve their problems, right? So they are very sort of what we can call do-it-yourself kind of customer base. They are fine to just get it on email, check it online and stuff. However, when you go to the next level of the next phase of growth with type B customer, there the infrastructure needs to be present to handle the large volumes of the of phone calls. So that's another way in which the whole delivery mechanism will need to evolve for retailers to take care of this next phase of growth. And we spoke about private label earlier that with an expansion of the customer segment into a much wider base, private labels become a very useful tool to increase the value perception of the user, right? So you are able to get a high quality product at a much more affordable price. So as things stand right now, private label is about 4% of the total pie, barely significant, right? And I think it's only a couple of categories where it hits the double-digit mark. It's FMCG, fashion, to some extent, furniture. But as the customer segment evolves, retailers will have to make a strong investments in creating a wide assortment of private label, especially in categories like fashion. We do have a few benchmarks of players there. I mean, Myntra has done very successfully with its footwear and other categories. But by and large, I think much more investment needs to go there to get an affordable offering of the consumer at a yeah. So private label will be a big lever of further growth when the customer segment expand. So just to in slide 22 sort of talks about the output of this whole exercise, right? So as e-commerce companies focus on increasing the assortment via private labels, as they increase infrastructure investments for supply chain and investments on user experience and other aspects of the customer journey happen, what all of this will impact ultimately is the P&L statement, right? So here we have put together a sample P&L statement for the industry from the calendar year 2017. So, as per this estimate, we can see that retailers were doing about $15 of loss for every $100 of items sold. So I think perhaps not a very high number. I mean, it has for some of the companies it has improved since the last year. But what we believe, as investments go on in assortment, in UX, supply chain, and others, this number is going to worsen in the short run. And I think that's where the funding which has been received from Walmart and some of the other big funds in the recent, but that's where all of this investment is going to go in. So in terms of implication of the next phase of growth, I think this is where it's all going to boil down to how the cash burn will worsen over the next few years. Yeah. Right. So just to give a quick summary after having spoken about how the landscape is evolving, I think primarily our big message from the first piece of this discussion was that how the user segments are going to completely dramatically change over the next few years. And that has implication in terms of how the user needs are going to evolve across the value chain, right? From the language they speak, the supply chain experience they want, and the products they want. And because of all these change in the needs of the segments, what retailers will need to do is to invest heavily to ensure that these needs are being met. And ultimately, all of that will lead to perhaps a much worse P&L statement in the short run. So that's how the landscape is evolving. Now we would like to just speak about which players are somewhat better positioned than others to sort of take advantage of this new world that is coming up in the retailing space. On this particular slide, we have broken down the industry by the top players who are present. I think I think I missed out on and define the legends. But anyway, we can see that the player with the blue color, that's the Flipkart group, pretty well accounting for about half of the all GMV in the Indian industry, followed up by Amazon, which has sort of lost some of the ground to Flipkart since 2016. And then the rest of the pie is made up by the smaller players, the likes of the Paytm, Shopclues on the horizontal sides, and on the vertical side, you have the likes of Nykaa, Big Basket, and all the other vertical companies. So over the next few years, we are confident that horizontals will continue to sort of serve the needs of the consumers the best. They will continue to account for three-fourths of all GMV happening on the e-commerce side. Now, why we are so confident of this assertion? I think, as you may remember, we pointed out earlier that mobiles is going to continue driving 50% of all GMV in the industry. Now, what that means is that horizontals have such a strong command of that category in terms of the deals they have with the brands, in terms of the total value proposition, from the product to the delivery to the post-delivery customer support. So the very complete control of the customer experience that is there on the smartphones category, that is going to enable horizontals to continue leading the game even till 2020. So that's going to be the biggest lever. Secondly, in our research with the consumers on the ground, the big trend we see that is that for a lot of people, horizontals are very, very closely linked to trust. So, if a product is an unknown product from an unknown brand, or maybe, yeah, even then, if it is sold on Amazon or a Flipkart, by its very nature, it becomes a highly trusted product, and the willingness to buy that product online grows up 20-fold. So what we believe is that horizontals, with their superior customer experience and the strong brand trust that they have created in the minds of the customers, they are going to act as sort of, you can say, gateway portals which bring the first time consumers on board. They will sort of remove the fear of the customers from online shopping, and with their seamless delivery experience, their uh, their largest selection, and of course the biggest discount, they are going to act as a lever which pulls up the first timers who have been so far afraid to come online. And as the delivery infrastructure and the service capability expands to serve these tier 2 and the type B customers, I think we'll see this happening more and more. So that's the reason why horizontals will continue to account for a very large chunk of the overall pie. And yeah. And of course, there are certain horizontals we believe they will be better positioned than others. Here we have just put together some snapshots, just a very high level indication of which companies are, which horizontals are doing well. So we have picked up two parameters. One is the user interface itself. So we just put some snapshots of Flipkart and Amazon user interface. I think it's not very clear, but the bigger point we're trying to make is that the platforms which give a user interface very clearly focused on the single offering, and making the discovery of the product very easy. That's a platform that's going to shine out for a type B customer, because for that kind of customer, the long tail selection with n number of details about the product and the reviews, that's not really going to work out when we speak to the customer, right? What the tier 2, the type B customers crave is clarity, simplicity, and discoverability. That's what to some extent Flipkart has achieved with its lighter, clearer interface. So that's one parameter. Second parameter is the post delivery. We spoke about how a tier 2 customer may not be so comfortable to buy a product without demos, without installation. That's where the advantage of an in-house delivery company like Jeeves, which Flipkart has, it perhaps may give it a captive advantage in which it can control the experience for tier 2 customers buying this category online. So these are initial thoughts on which horizontals will win the game. It's a long journey ahead, so may or may not exactly pan out. But Flipkart does seem to have an advantage on a couple of fronts. So we spoke about horizontals dominating the game right till 2020. Does this mean that there will be nothing left for the verticals to play with? So we disagree on that. We believe that super verticals, what we call it. So these are verticals like Nykaa with basket and all the other smaller ones besides plans. They will continue to account for 18% of the pie by 2020, and this means, in a sense, about $6 billion of additional opportunity that is going to be created for super verticals over the next few years. So that's that's not at all a small number by any chance, right? In spite of horizontals really dominating the game, there will still be significant space for super verticals to play their game and to capture a large share of the customers. Now, what kind of super vertical is going to win this kind of opportunity? We understand that the super verticals who offer a solution-based approach. So that's what is going to win out. It's not just going to be any vertical which comes up and offers a standard set of offerings. What is required is a comprehensive ecosystem of offerings where you club together stuff like blogs and videos. You enable the customers to discover the product. You offer them not just products but a comprehensive suite of services. So in this slide, we have tried to give few examples of a couple of verticals, which is Nykaa and First Cry, Hopscotch, how they have been able to create a complete solution for the customers rather than selling a product. And the impact of this kind of activity is clear to see, right? So, for example, Nykaa has a clear lead of about more than 50% versus the number 2 player in the beauty personal care category. In the baby care space, we see that the industry is growing really fast because the first timers to buying this category online, they find this solution approach very appealing as a customer, where you can share the photos of your kids, where you can sort of access the blog from parents. So that is the game that is going to win out in the super vertical space. I think we have put together one small case study on Nykaa just to show how dominant it is in the beauty and personal care category. So perhaps not the best color combination, but anyway, what this slide is trying to show is that Nykaa has a very strong lead over the next players in terms of its total GMV. So it's about $155 million of annualized GMV. And as we can see, in all the premium specialized categories like makeup and fragrances, men's grooming, I think especially makeup, I think Nykaa has a very, very strong lead over the competitors. So what is happening in what will happen in the vertical space is that even within specific categories, the specialized pieces of the pie, so for beauty it is makeup and others, that will go to a vertical which offers the solution approach, while the much more sort of, you can say, mass commoditized categories, subcategories like personal care, that will move towards the horizontals. As we can see in this chart, Amazon having 36% of its beauty sales from the skincare category. So this kind of specialization from the premium versus the commodity category is what's going to happen on the verticals play. So we spoke about which verticals are going to sort of which players are going to perform well given the new nature of the retailing market evolution. I think in this next section we'll just speak about how offline will perhaps play a key role in taking the industry forward. So in this slide on the left side, we see that even in the most advanced of economies, online retail is about 18-20% of the pie, right? I mean, it's kind of start stagnating when it starts reaching that 20% mark. So of course, as a result of this, we see companies in China like Alibaba pursuing this new retail strategy where they want to digitize the 80% of the pie that is not online. So multi-channel play is definitely becoming a big play in the other countries. And in India also, we see a lot of challenges and opportunities to execute this play. Why? Because many customers are not comfortable with pure play online shopping, as we spoke about. And there's like almost 90% of India's retail is these kirana mom and pop shops. They are not so comfortable. I mean, they are pretty much out from the digital growth. So I think with the multi-channel play, there is a significant chance to sort of tie together these aspects and benefit the customer side as well as the retailers who are present in the ecosystem. So two major multi-channel plays are being experimented within India. I think we have talked about the O2O play and the omni-channel play. So when we say O2, essentially this means that a company ties up with the store so a customer can pay using the digital QR code option inside the store and gain the full benefits of the online deals and everything while having the benefit of discovering the products right from the comfort of his home. While an omni-channel play is where a big retailer, they can use tools like endless aisle so that when a person enters the store, they can use these tools to order online from within the store itself. So it's a small nuance of difference between the two different plays. But the reason we wanted to point out these two plays separately is because the players executing it are very different. Paytm is one of the leading players on the O2O side. I think they sort of brought to India the strategy they were undertaking in China. And of course, Adidas is one of the few players who have been moving ahead on the omni-channel play. Of course, it's very, very early days yet for this kind of play in India. I think we'll talk about how small this play is, but I think this will be a key differentiator going down the line. So we spoke about Paytm, how they do O2O model, where the user can use a smartphone to purchase the product in the store, which he has discovered already from the comfort of his house. So this model has got a lot of initial traction, and in our tracking of the industry, we see almost 50 million plus of monthly GMV being done by Paytm through this kind of O2O model. So what does all of this essentially mean, right? So on the left side of this slide, we show the breakdown of the total organized retail market in India. So India is about an $800 billion total retail market, out of which in CY17, about 11% of that number, 12% of that number was on the organized side, $90 billion. So within this pie today, multi-channel retail, wherein an retailer, wherein an offline player does some online sales and online player does some offline sales, that plays a very, very tiny part of the pie, right? It's barely more than $1 billion. I mean, 2% of the organized retail in India in CY17. However, over the next few years, driven by these pressures on both offline retailers as well as online retailers to sort of expand their customer base, we see multi-channel retailing being the fastest single sub-segment of the total organized pie. So while the traditional organized retail will continue to grow at 14%, that's what it has always grown at. And online, we mentioned pure online will be about 40%. But we do see multi-channel being the fastest of at 65%. And the interesting piece is that this 65% growth rate kind of mirrors the growth of pure online in the early stages of Indian e-commerce. So when we started tracking the industry in 2014, these were the kind of growth rates we were seeing, right? And that was the sort of inflection point for the industry. So right now we believe multi-channel is at that inflection point, and from the supply side, customer side, retailer side, there are a lot of moves we are seeing in the market, which indicates that we are pretty much ready to grow rapidly. When this kind of growth happens, I think it means opportunities for all stakeholders. Of course, for organized retailers, it's a chance to participate in the digital growth which is happening. For mom and pop stores, which have till now been totally left out from the big boom of digital, I think it's gives them more discoverability, better sales, better customer knowledge. And finally, from a supplier standpoint, I think third-party logistics companies, many of them perhaps who missed out on the boom of the regular e-commerce on the food tech, for this new delivery segment in omni-channel, this local delivery, this could become an opportunity to sort of enter a new market and take back the what they lost out in when they missed out the pure play e-commerce growth. So I think so large opportunity present on the multi-category, multi-channel side. Just move on to, I think one of the big agendas of our today's discussion was how will potentially Walmart investment impact the Flipkart and the industry. So we have just put together a few analysis. I think one of the way we look at it is that Walmart provides a very strong global toolkit of experience, right? So with their very deep experience in the FMCG category on private labels and strong assortment design, that becomes a very big lever to move the FMCG lever of Flipkart. Along with that, of course, we all know that Walmart has strong culture of supply chain efficiency at a very big scale, from sourcing to distribution. So as the scale of the industry improves, the efficiencies and the cost which needs to come down, that kind of learning can very well be taken up from Walmart. And of course, the large funding round reduces the uncertainty for the Flipkart, so they can focus on building their e-commerce rather than all the time looking for funding as is happening in 2016, 17. That's what Walmart brings to the table. And of course, Flipkart has a very strong bottom-up understanding of the market, of the customer psyche. 10 years they've been selling to the Indian customers across the years, and they have a very strong, what you call, the leadership in the key categories in electronics and fashion. So with this deep understanding from the bottom up of the customer segments, coupled with Walmart's toolkits from their global experience, together we believe it's a very powerful combination, which adds a lot of synergy to Flipkart and will enable it to drive the next stage of growth. And so it's not just the Flipkart which Walmart is going to impact, right? So we believe with Walmart's entry, the whole ecosystem is going to benefit. We talked about this online maturation curve of customers earlier, and in the last stage of the maturation curve, what people need is a reliable and a trustable sort of buying experience, which motivates them to shift from services to buying fashion and other categories. This is where the Walmart's entry will accelerate this process, because with their better pricing, with their private labels and their overall supreme supply chain expertise, the fears that people have in shifting to e-commerce and the good deals that they seek when coming online, all that those problems will be sorted. So essentially, Walmart will not just be helping out Flipkart; they will be creating a mature set of customers that can be leveraged by different services and different sort of e-commerce portals to bring their own growth. It's going to be beneficial for the whole industry, of course. And finally, I think last couple of trends probably we'd like to talk about how the industry is shaping up. So in our interactions with a lot of the companies that we work with, plus of course from the other stakeholders in the ecosystem, I think we see that retailers are, so till now we have been speaking about how the customer base will expand from type A to type B, right? That's been the big story we talk about. However, it's not, along with that, there's going to be other levers as well. While it's important to expand to type B customer segments, other lever to pull is to make the experience of the type A customer segment very strong. That's where a model like Amazon Prime and in general the subscription model, that's where that is going to be in traction. And as per the statistics mentioned here, we can see that more than one third of all Amazon orders now coming from Prime members. So the type A customer is a focus area, and players are on how to retain them, offer them music, offer them content. So we read about Flipkart sort of going to launch content in a very big way. So that's where the type A customer gets targeted very well. Along with that, after having learned how to serve the the premium or the type A customer very well in India, many of these e-commerce companies are looking at to export their learnings to global markets. Because in many ways, the customer who's sitting out of metro, the 3M customer or the type A customer, they are very similar to sort of some of the customer segments sitting outside the country. So the learning to serve that customer from assortment, supply chain perspective, that's what retailers want to transfer abroad and to further push their growth. Other key points, I think the sale-driven models, of course, I think 30% of all the GMV of Indian e-commerce was just contributed by 10% of the sale days. So in that sense, we are moving to that China-like model where a few days contribute sales in a very big way. So that sale is going to become another big lever. I think this is especially important for the type B consumer because we see in our historical research that on sale days, there is a big addition of new customers who come to the portal. So that's the first three moves, and the fourth one we spoke about how hyperlocal and omnichannel are going to sort of work together to become a big play in the industry going forward. So with that, I think pretty much would like to close. I hope this was useful and somehow we were able to bring out some insightful points. So thanks a lot for joining this and for bearing with us for the last hour. And as mentioned at the start, if there are any questions that you have, you can send us across on mail or chat. We'll be happy to send the response back to those in form of, we'll be happy to respond back to those. So look forward to any questions.
Yeah, thanks Mrigank and Ujjwal for that insightful chat over the past hour. Thank you all for your participation and your time. We deeply appreciate this, you supporting our initiative. We look forward to your queries, as Mrigank has mentioned, over the next couple of days, and we collate them and respond back to you in a comprehensive FAQ format. We'll certainly come back to you again over the next 3 to 4 weeks with another interesting segment where we'll announce and send out an invite and walk you through another over the next hour. Thank you very much.